All right. We'll welcome everybody to Corporate Services Committee meeting on the 19th of July 2024. Call this meeting open at 9 a.m. and we'll move forward into applications for attending meeting via video link.
Through you, Mr. Chair, there's one application to attend via video link. Councillor Mackenzie, who is online at this point in time.
Do I have a mover? Move Councillor Campbell, second Councillor Burns. All those in favour? I think the ayes have it. Welcome, Councillor Mackenzie. Now there being a full house here, there being no apologies.
Correct, Mr. Chair.
Do we have any disclosures of interest today?
No disclosure of interest received, Mr. Chair.
And public participation?
We have no public participation
I don't think
today.
we've managed to tick that box yet, have we? That's a lifelong goal.
I would just like to note that there is a member in the gallery, which is, a first for us as well. And
there is.
well done, young fella, coming in, taking a bit of interest in local government. Well done.
And we'll move on with the business items, please, Mr. Phelps, with the Finance Committee reports.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chair. The first one we'll look at is Corp 07.1, just the quarterly financial summary and investment report. So on page 3, here we're showing at the end of the June financial year. So this is our last month of the financial year. We have a negative variance to budget at the moment of 8.6 million, which is complete contrast to last month, which was a positive variance of 11.3 million. So we'll talk about that as we're going down through the numbers. Overall, this is the initial result for June. There'll be a lot of end of year accruals for accounting purposes coming in, and primarily the main accrual coming into the mix will be on revenue items and recognition of grants that are for a lot of our major projects coming through. Just running you through the major variations behind the actual variance to budget. On page 4, so our operating revenue is down by about $10 million at this point in time, which is about 10% of the overall budget. Main contributors in here are mainly driven around a lot of capital grant funding, but we'll talk about those as we go through each individual item. Our plant disposal revenue is lower by about $84,000. Just delay in the disposal of a couple of replacement vehicles at year end, which you'll see we were waiting on the delivery of a couple come the end of the June period that haven't came in July effectively. Revenue services is down by about 75,000. There's been lower than expected debt recovery action for the year. Government place personal care subsidies are up by about $90,000, which is pleasing. So there's just increase in subsidies due to the assessments undertaken over the course of the year. But it's the increase is tempered by continual vacancies for the year though. So that higher revenue stream may have been a lot higher had we had it fully tenanted for the year. Our early learning centre is higher by about 44,000. It's continued with the utilisation at the facility. Economic promotion grant revenue was higher by 120, just with the receipt of our Open Streets program tourism grant. So hopefully there'll be a number of events happening over the course of the 24-25 year. Sale yards revenue is higher by about 66. We've had a bit of an increase in our throughput for the year, up by about 1,000 head on what was budgeted for.
Sale yards. Very interesting to note in the land paper, the sale or proposed sale of the Dubbo sale yards did not go through, and they're talking about lifting the sale yard charges, etc., by I think it's around 32%, but I may be incorrect on that. 36. So I guess that we need to just keep our eye on that, because I believe that it is. What council has done is tried to maintain a proper revenue stream coming in, but also look after what it's costing here. I will just digress. We sold some sheep, 213 sheep in Dubbo, and the commission was $3,065. So let's not think about what the agents get out of it. Then we had all the other charges on top of that.
Thank you, councillor. Moving down to the Hunter Warbirds revenue, as mentioned previously, it's lower by about $450,000. We've had the lower centre admission coming in, just with the foot traffic coming into the facility. Reduced cafe income, obviously, with the leasing out of the facility now there. And our Warbirds over Scone event, its income was lower coming through. Also, we haven't had any real major other events undertaken out there, other than a few minor ones, which has been included in your revenue streams, but no other major ones other than the Warbirds over Scone for the year. So it's a little bit down on the revenue. Waste revenue was lower by 200,000. We did do a revised budget coming through from in April. So through you, Mr. Chair. No, it's just the landfill. We've just overestimated. We thought that we'd get a lot more landfill disposal revenue coming in. Yeah, waste. Yeah. So it's only because of that. Overall for the year, we've definitely been above the original budget though. That was up by about 1.3 million in landfill revenue.
So you're saying this is a good news story?
Yeah,
It's less
it is a
waste.
good, yeah.
It's less waste in the community.
Correct. Yeah,
That's
Yeah.
good to know.
that's good to know.
May I just ask, are you finished? I just need to
Mm.
ask regarding the Gummin Place. I think that it should be put on notice that the new council should thoroughly investigate that, because we no matter what we're trying to do, we're getting on top of the debt, and I think it has to be brought to the new council, but also to address that situation, because it's continuing on, and I believe that we, as a council and the council, we have endeavoured to arrest that problem, but it is not getting any better. It's got to be addressed.
Yeah, which we'll talk about that as we get into the detail going down.
Yeah.
So with the next one on page 5, here our general revenue streams is up by nearly $2 million. So our financial assistance grants in advance did come in. We budgeted for 50%, 85% came in advance coming through. Our cemetery revenue is down by 38,000. We just had lower site plots and interment fees. It's one of those ones that will swing depending on unfortunately the death within the community. So it's one that continues to go up and down. Our town planning revenue is higher than budget by about 289. So we've had some additional funding coming through for some grants in regards to our flood management plans, increasing our Section 94 contributions, plus also we recognise the VPAs for Dartbrook and Mac Energy now. So that's been quite pleasing.
Could you explain how those VPAs are being treated? And they're obviously going through the town planning books. How are we working that going forward?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. The VPAs are effectively treated the same as what a Section 94 contribution will be, where it's put through as an external restriction, held for the benefit of those communities that the VPAs are actually for. So those funds will remain in perpetuity until such time as there's a program or a infrastructure development that they can be utilised towards.
Yeah, so going forward, you'll have a pretty solid idea then of your budgeting for town planning revenue, including these VPAs that obviously aren't part of operations.
Correct.
Or,
yes.
So will they be moved? Will they be reappropriated within the balance sheet?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, they are shown as restricted assets. So it's similar to the water and sewer fund and your development contributions, where they are shown against the balance sheet to say that they are restricted moving forward. Moving into swimming pool revenue, it's lower by about $180,000. Here, the balance of the grant funding for the pool amenities work that we've undertaken, that'll be recognised at year end. Our White Park revenue was lower by about $170,000. We only really achieved about 50% of our revenue streams for White Park during the year. We have got a number of events that have shown interest in coming to the facility that are coming from other facilities, which is quite pleasing. And now with our energising of the powered sites for our camping down there, about 20 sites at the end of July, that hopefully will attract more events to the facility itself. So we see that going forward to be improving.
Have we completed an acquittal on that, on those works down there, or is that just yet to be?
That's yet to be completed.
What's the timeframe on the acquittal?
So acquittal will probably 3 months after the end of the actual project.
Yep.
So we're looking at the end of the project, probably by the end of August, say, by the time everything goes through. So that acquittal is pretty well by the end of November.
Thanks.
Moving into the other side of, as we've just discussed with the grant funds, it's lower by about $720,000. That's the balance of the grant funding that's to be recognised at year end as a debtor. Aerodrome revenue is lower than budget by about $134,000. Our user fees are actually up. So our user fees are up by about $16,000 on what we budgeted for, but it's offset by the final grant funding component of the workshop that we're doing. So we'll be recognising a debtor for the capital grants coming through for that project. Our bridge revenue was lower by about $2.6 million, predominantly due to capital grant funding. Morales Street hasn't progressed as far as we thought that would happen by the end of June. We're undertaking the works on that as we're coming into the new financial year. The bridge capital works that we undertook, a lot of that works was done pre-June 23. So effectively, you'll see a reduction in the capital expenditure as well as we're coming through the numbers. So that's just a lower revenue stream on one side, plus also a lower capital expenditure on the other side. So it's pretty well been on track, on budget with those projects as we've come through. Moving into our footpath revenue on page 6, it's lower by about $135,000. The final grant funding milestone for the Merriwell Footpath Cycleway extensions to be recognised as a year-end debtor. Transport for New South Wales state roads, the revenue was lower by about $370,000 at the end of June. Our final claims for June is to be recognised as a year-end process. Those claims have just initially been done, and it'd be around about $1.3 million. So obviously we've got a overexpend in the operation expenditure, which will be covered off by the extra revenue that we're going to generate during the year. Regional roads grant revenue lower by about $2 million. It's effectively lower initial funding of the MR358 upgrade works. We anticipated to get one final milestone before the end of the financial year, but that didn't eventuate. But it would have just gone into grants in advance anyway. So our actual project is continuing well and on budget at this point in time. Local roads grant revenue was lower again by about nearly $2 million. Here we've got to recognise the Moonam Brook works and also our flood damage works coming through. So we recognise those as revenue coming in. Those two items effectively have been offset marginally by the additional revenue we received from the financial assistance grants in advance, the road component of that. So
Through you, Mr. Chair, we were lucky enough to have the state roads minister here yesterday, transport minister, and we made representations to her about the inequities of the financial assistance grants. Dan Repicoli was here as well, representing the Honourable Catherine King from the federal government. So we made our representations about the inequities of financial assistance grants around how rural councils receive less money than city councils because they have more people there, yet they have less roads. So we have made that representation on several occasions now. When I say several, I mean about 100 since I've been around. So we will continue to bang that drum because it is an inequity within the system, and we deserve the $4,000 a K instead of the $1,400 a K. When I say $4,000 a K, Mr. Chair, I mean Vaucluse gets $4,000 a K for 300 Ks of road. We've got 2,100 Ks and we get around 1,400. So it is a ridiculous inequity based on an archaic algorithm. And we continue to bang that drum, as does the Country Mayors, as does all other organisations that do not live within 5 Ks of Sydney Harbour.
Thank you, councillor. Moving into our next item here which is our transport auxiliaries. It's lower than budget by about $3.6 million. Obviously we'll have some end of year grant funding to take up in regards to our Scone CBD upgrade works, which has progressed rather seamlessly coming through, which has been quite good. Our sewer revenue is higher by about 47K, just higher grant funding coming through for our integrated water catchment management project. The plans that have been done up for that to give us an idea of a 10-year plan going forward for our water and sewer networks. It's been offset slightly by a bit lower access charges and user fees to date. Our water supply revenue is higher by about 67 again. Again, similar to the sewer, it's higher because of the WCM and lower because of access and user charges today. Moving into the non-operating revenue and expenses, it's down by about $1.2 million. Pretty well as the internal fleet cost coming through. So we're continuing looking at that. It's pretty well stayed stagnant and we've been hitting budget since December. And we'll continue to go back and we're going to have a look at the first 6 months to see whether or not we can push that into some of our roadwork areas. Moving on to our operating expenditure, we're a little bit overspent here by about $2 million. Running through the highlighted numbers, our financial services area, it's lower. Our costs are lower by about 252, which is pretty well an offset that comes through for our overhead costs. So we've applied an overhead cost on the recovery of our bridge replacement program. So that's just a bit of a internal transfer and effectively use the.
That's really the biggest stuff, is it?
The 2 million. Yeah. Yeah, so as we go through the actual main variations, you'll see where the actual $2 million does come into play. And a lot of that $2 million is in regards to monies that we'll be recovering back through into increased revenue streams as well. So as we walk down through that, fleet management is higher by about 17K, been lower plant maintenance and supervision costs, but it was offset slightly by higher fuel costs from the price of fuel. Our information technology area is down by about 300,000. Had a bit of cost saving from consultants, which has been quite good, and some staff vacancies and extended leave undertaken as well. There's some timing variances with the software licenses being prepaid by year end, so they become prepaid expenses coming through.
I'm sure we'll stretch this out further later. But just on the financial services cost lower than budget, where did those costs, I assume, were coming from that grant funding that went into the bridge replacement costing there? where did we make savings in there or did we cost shift? And where did we cost shift to, if so?
With those corporate overhead costs, they were recovered through a capital grant. So we effectively received additional grant funding.
Yep.
On top of the actual construction costs.
Yep.
For our corporate overheads. So we received a bit of extra revenue streams coming through.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So your costs were lower because that's a grant
Correct.
of 252.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so it's an overhead cost that comes in.
Yeah.
As a credit to the financial services
That's
area.
all right. I read that.
Yep.
I read that somewhat differently. So I'm glad I asked the stupid question.
No, that's fine, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Revenue services is down by about 100,000. We've had lower salaries in that area with some staff vacancies that have been filled about halfway through the year, and reduced costs from debt recovery. So we haven't had much debt recovery at all during the year, which we're trying to ramp up this current financial year. Government Place Hostel, we had that additional revenue streams, but our costs are the ones that knock it around a fair bit. So it's up by nearly $600,000. So it's just the cost of staffing the facility, which have been a lot higher based on regulations that the department has placed upon all facilities with aged care, plus additional costs for consultants that we utilised during the year. Real estate costs are higher by about 89,000, just additional costs with some administration and land development, which we will get some sort of benefit down the track when we go through the process of our excess land and developing that moving forward. Sale yards cost is higher by about 90,000. We just had some additional costs associated with the special sales and higher than expected truck wash utility costs. So utilisation of the truck wash.
Mr. Chair, would that also include the concern with some of those that the yards were not cleaned and would that be involved? That would be part of that?
Yeah, so there is a lot of
That
maintenance. Yeah, yes.
Has been completed.
Yeah, yes, through you, Mr. Chair. Those works are a lot of maintenance works as well. So our facility maintenance is up considerably as well, based on the wet weather, obviously, that's created that is
The
issues.
cause of the problems today, excuse me, Mr. Chair, the problem was the fact of blocked drains. And that's, I mean, you can clean them out. That's very easy to do, but however, fixing the problem, and that's not going to happen again.
Yeah, exactly. And those have been sorted now.
All right, thank you.
Stormwater drainage on the roads, it's lower by about $90,000, so it's just less maintenance undertaken. On page 8, we've got the waste operation expenditures lower by about 64. It's been relatively consistent to budgets, just a bit of a curbside collection offset by higher operational costs in Merriwa and Scone. Overall, it's pretty well running on budget, which is quite pleasing. Public amenity costs are higher by about $88,000. It's higher than expected costs of servicing the actual public amenities within our parks and facilities. So we're looking at that moving forward to try and reduce those costs down to within budget. Town planning costs are higher by about 64. So we've had some additional consultant costs coming through associated with the planning portal, flood management and some land studies. So we'll go through that as we're coming through the mix into the major areas of the services. Building services costs are lower by about 107. We just had lower salaries due to staff vacancies and some extended leave. But our revenue streams have been still buoyant within that area. Quarry costs are higher by about 420,000. Here we've got the effectively some major blasting and crushing of material coming through the mix. And a lot of that material is being used for grant funded works. And then we'll have a stockpile going forward at year end for further works down the track.
Mr. Chair, that would.
Bring the mic closer to you.
I'm sorry.
Councillor Mackenzie can't hear.
I'm sorry. I wouldn't like to miss that out. Not hearing what I have to say, Belinda. Thank you. Would that be to do with the QAN base? I was not aware of any of the other blasting. because the blasting up on MR 358 would be all to do with the original amount allocated.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, it's to do with Elliston Pit as well as Kiln
I
Pit.
see, righto.
Yeah, so a lot of material had to be won at Elliston Pit for Moonam Brook and Barrington Forest
good.
roads coming through.
Thank you.
Moving into our other sport and recreation areas, here we've got our other costs lower by about 66,000. The coordinator within that area has another role within council as well, so we've had a bit of reduction in our salaries area, plus also the reduced cost incurred on the Scone Mountain bike track project for the year to date. So we've got a little bit of work just to finalise that project and get that off the books. Sporting ground costs are higher by about 240. Increased cost of water usage and the servicing of the grounds during the year. Again, similar to the public amenities, we'll be looking at that and seeing where we can reduce costs to make it more efficient as and when we do come through the mix for our facilities.
Through you, Mr. Chair, can we just, can we sort of have a look at water use? I struggle to understand how we're using more water in today's climate. I'm not against water use. I'm not against making sure that the sporting grounds are sorted, but if we're up now and during the drought we were down, is my memory, I just can't see the theory behind it.
Through you, Mr. Chair. There was a dry patch at the beginning of the year. Obviously, as we're coming through the last probably 3 to 4 months, it has been quite damp. But prior to that, it was actually quite dry. Even though it wasn't overly taxing with the heat, but there was no water.
So as on that, this is a frustration of mine because it has been raining for 6 months and it does look ugly, but it was a dry patch. I have a very large irrigation bill from earlier in the financial year myself, but the water utilised up at especially Bill Rose, primarily to my knowledge, comes from the wastewater treatment plant. How are we charging that sport and rec internally for those water charges?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we do have a set rate of $1 per kilolitre that does come through for council parks and facilities and sporting grounds.
So that would be treated water.
That effectively is any water usage that we do use coming through.
Okay. So what I'm suggesting, so $1 a kilolitre, what's that a meg? What's that, $1,000 a meg? So if I was watering an ex-dairy farm, which was Bill Rose, which has bore entitlements, would there not be the opportunity to be running irrigation water? Or is it actually more financially viable just to shift funds around within council in that charging system?
Through you, Mr. Chair, because the water fund is a total separate fund, it's identified as has to be paid user charges accordingly. So we can't not charge ourselves coming through. Otherwise, that's to the detriment of those other funds.
So I suppose what I'm saying, is there a business case to just irrigate the thing using irrigation water, not from our water and sewer?
Yeah. Through you, Mr. Chair, we'll take that on notice and come back with a scenario around the two options available. Moving down into our bridge maintenance, it's lower by about $280,000. Reduced maintenance, obviously, with councils going through their replacement program. So haven't had as much requirement for maintenance of our remaining bridges. Footpath costs are lower by about $60,000 of reduced maintenance undertaken, with that works being mainly reactive at this point in time. Our local roads, admin and training costs is high by about 250,000. We've continued with that, intensive training of road construction maintenance and facilities, and also associated staffing costs. So we've continued trying to facilitate our workforce and improve their utilisation and productivity through those training programs. Our regional and local roads maintenance is lower than budget by about $440,000, mainly lower in general maintenance, road maintenance, due to the prioritisation of our capital and flood restoration works. So we've undertaken, a lot of our crews have gone up on the hill, effectively coming through. RMS state road costs, it's higher by about 1.13 million, not the 173K that's written there on the actual books. So 1.13K is the increase there. Apologies for the typographic error. So that's pretty well the increase in our activity. So we had a fair bit of work requests in regards to an intersection along Cassilis, near Cassilis there. So we've undertaken those works, which are effectively beyond charge. So that's our $1 million extra that we're receiving coming in.
So, Mr. Chair, I understand that I will be travelling that road later on today, and hopefully that to see the result. But I was told that it came together very well up there. Is that so? It has been completed, and that did not cost council. That was actually Transport for New South Wales. Is that correct?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. That was works that were programmed with Transport for New South Wales, being a state highway, and those works were finalised at the end of June, with a bit of carryover costs coming into July. But majority of the works were completed pre-June.
So
Okay,
I
thank you.
travelled out there
Yeah.
over the weekend, Ronnie, and I'll confirm it's a very nice piece of roadworks.
Good,
It's got a
yeah.
nice offshoot into Cassilis there, and it for the trucks, it does have a nice curvature and does give that little bit of breathing space that perhaps we didn't have there before. It was a little chunky, and so you can send your truck up the hill on the
Yeah.
way back to Marywell.
Yes, I'll be travelling after I finish here this afternoon. So it's really good. But it's those are the things I think that are really good. A good news story, not only for the people of Cassilis, but also for our Shire. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Moving into our next item there, which is our sewer admin maintenance charges are high by about 1.38 million. We're going through that with the end of year process that we're doing at the moment and capitalising some costs out of there for some works that were improvements to our infrastructure network. And with the water supply as well, it's up by about $500,000. And again, we're reviewing that and seeing what other costs we can bring out there for renewal. So as you can see, the reason why we're overspent, Councillor Campbell, is those last three items. So you're up by significant dollars in those three areas there.
So
Okay.
just tracking back there, Wayne. So we've got an expenditure. We're over expenditure on state roads of 1.13, but we're lower than budget by 367 on revenue. How much shortfall are we expecting to have come in?
So effectively, we've got about $1.3 million to $1.4 million that will be end of year debtor. So effectively, we're covering off our overexpend there.
Yeah.
And that still retains a profit margin at the end of the day.
My maths is possibly a little different there, but we're looking to. It looks like a break-even scenario.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes. So coming through, but we do have a little bit of a surplus coming through when we're looking through the service areas. So as we go through there, I'll highlight where we actually make a little bit of dollars.
Yep, very good. As long as they're built right.
That's correct.
That's the primary goal.
That's correct.
Thanks, Wayne.
Capital expenditure, here we're a little bit underspent at the moment by about $4.8 million. Main reasons for this is our fleet replacement program's down by about 114, as I mentioned earlier, with those couple of disposals. Just had the delay in delivery of our last couple of vehicles for the year that were on order. They've come in July. Our sale yard sludge ponds, due to EPA requirements, we had to clean out those ponds. It's cost us effectively about $140,000. So we've drained both ponds, so the big pond and the little pond, and that effectively is sort of like a 15 to 20-year maintenance that's been undertaken this year. Quarry exploration is higher by about 94. We're finalising the DA for Kiln Pit, so hopefully that will be finalised shortly. Our White Park electrical supply, it's higher than budget by about nearly $250,000, obviously with the mad rush to get that facility electrical upgrade finalised. We're a little bit higher than budget, which will be covered off by grant funding. Morella Street Causeway, as I said earlier, the project is lower than budget by about $800,000. Just with delays with the fisheries permits that were required. The works have now been rescoped so that project can be completed and move it on. So we've been talking with our funding body as well, and we'll be going back to them with a change in scope just to finalise the project. Our bridge replacement program, lower.
If I may, and the estimated time of completion, it's been on the books for about 5 or 6 years. However, estimated time of completion, if we've got all these things in place now, can you give any indication of that? Or
through you, Mr. Chair, probably can't give you a definitive time frame, but I would expect it to be finished before the end of December, before the end of the calendar year. Moving into our bridge replacement program, lower than budget by $1.6 million. That's effectively the works that were carried out pre the 24 financial year. So that's also the offsetter against the lower capital revenue. So that bridge program is now fully complete, with the Dartbrook Bridge being opened by the Minister only yesterday. The footpath capital works is lower than budget by about $140,000. We've completed project costs for Aberdeen Merriwa have been lower than expected, and we haven't undertaken any curb ramp works during the year, which is about $25,000. So we'll be doing a bit of that curb ramp works in the current financial year. Main Road 62 with the Murdering Hut Gully is lower than budget by $500,000. We haven't undertaken any further works in regards to the road, Main Road 62. We've got that in future budgets going forward now, on a constant basis over the next 3 to 4 years. So we'll be undertaking works as and when we can coming through. Coulson's Creek Road, lower than budget by about $1.2 million. We're just waiting on the June project claim to come through, which we only just recently received, which is about $2 million. So that'll be back up over budget there. And it's pretty well, it's not over budget in regards to the project itself. It's just the timing of those works being undertaken. Moving into our regional and local heavy patch program, lower than budget by about $90,000. We've pretty well completed the program for the year, obviously, and we were relatively nearly spot on budget. Similar with the resheet program, it's $115,000 lower. That program's to be complete, and it will continue into the current financial year. With our local roads culvert subsidence works, we haven't undertaken any works in regards to culvert subsidence. No subsidence were identified during the year, but we'll be continually looking at that as we come through into the current financial year. Moonam Brook Road, lower than budget by about $322,000. The project's continuing on schedule. The final cost to be received for the year, so we've got a few more costs coming in for the end of the year. That works has now been revised from June to to be finalised in July and August. Unfortunately, we've had a lot of wet weather up there on the hill. So it's been delayed with a bit of our sealing timeframes due to the undercourse being too damp to seal over. Barrington Forest Road, stages 1 and 2 is higher than budget by about $330,000. So obviously, while we've been waiting for Moonam Brook to finalise, we've been doing work up on Barrington Forest Road. So we've continued our productivity up there and continue that project. And we're waiting for some final costs for this one to come in as well. But the works are hopefully to be finalised by the end of December, which will be pleasing. Kalingal Road works is higher by about 285. That's flood damage works, which will be identified in a fully grant fund end of year processing. The betterment program Causeways is lower than budget by about 62,000. We're only just kicking those projects off with the actual approvals being received from Resilience or through Transport. So those works will be underway in earnest over the course of the next 6 months. The Scone CBD works is lower by about $190,000. The project's continuing on schedule. It's pumping along. Works are definitely to be finalised by the end of September. As we can see, there's a lot of sealing works that have been undertaken in the last month coming through. UV chlorination.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just on that project, I'd just like to make it public that is not the final seal. There is another seal to go over the top. So everyone just take a chill pill for a second. It's not the final seal. There has been no mistake made.
Thank you, Councillor, for the clarification. Moving into our UV chlorination project, lower than budget by about $80,000. The initial project concept designs are continuing with delivery deferred until the 24-25 year. Our water treatment plant upgrade, we're effectively been in consultation or discussions with a neighbouring council in regards to making a significant upgrade to our water treatment plant from the Glenbourne Dam. So we're in initial project concept designs at the moment, and they didn't commence before the year end. So we've just been in discussions. Sewer relining works, lower than budget by about 90K. Overall, the works are complete and the costs have been lower than what we anticipated coming through. And similarly with our water sewer mains replacement, it's lower by about 120,000 with only minimal works required during the year, which is mainly predominantly the reactive works when we have breakages and so forth. So overall, as you can see there, we've got $8.6 million negative result to budget, which is predominantly from your operating revenue, which will be a lot of the capital grants to be shown in the end of year process. Moving into our bank funds and investment report on page 12. I beg your pardon, on our budget position summary on page 12. As you can see, there's no votes or surrenders coming through for the current month. Obviously, with the end of year, we don't bring those into account because we've hit the end of year. Bank funds and investment report. At the end of June 24, council did have $42.8 million in the bank. We received a fair bit of grant funding in advance for Main Road 358 in previous months, in April, May. So that came into play, plus also a little bit increase in our financial assistance grants in advance than we anticipated.
Chair, if I just may ask, it's relating to MR 358, the cost of getting the, I think it's GHD and Douglas and Partners, that thing to design that project. Did we have, it has come through, can you revise me, the cost of getting that design work done?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we'd have to take that on notice, Councillor,
Yeah, okay.
and get those costs for you.
That'd just be very interesting. I had in my mind 500,000. I could be wrong, but I'd like it just clarified. Thank you.
Yep, that's fine. Moving in further into the bank funds and investments. At the moment, we have in our investment hole $36 million at the end of June. as identified in the schedule that's attached to the report. Our external loan funds is $29.4 million. Obviously, we didn't take any loans out during the 23-24 year. And that balance has been reduced over the course of the year. So that comes down by about 2 million each year through our repayment cycle. During the month of June, we requested an approval from the Office of Local Government to undertake some internal loans. We have a large portion of capital works grant funding from government that's outstanding at the end of June. So to make sure that we fell within the legislation, we applied to the Office of Local Government to utilise some of the residual balances within our water and sewer fund. At that point in time, we were unsure about whether the financial assistance grants would be paid in advance again or not. So we went through that process and they approved that, and the letter of approval is included within the papers coming through.
Just on that, I've got that letter open at the moment, but I'd like, on behalf of the councillor, or on behalf of myself, the councillor group can speak for themselves, but I'd like to thank yourself and your team and General Manager Greg McDonald for making this a very transparent operation, and thank you for seeing this problem in advance and being on the front foot and making it very legalised. It's important that we get these process documentations in place, and it does take time and effort before contractors do come knocking on our door. So as much as it's an inconvenience, a difficulty, and somewhat problematic in other ways, well done to all involved.
Mr. Chair, I agree entirely in what your comments there. There was a time when I think it's a few years ago now where monies had to be found to pay, and it wasn't sort of known. And then the social media got hold of it, and of course certain individuals, and endeavoured to denigrate the council. However, this time it's all been clear and above. Everybody can read that. Well, it was in the confidential, but the point is that it went out through council. It's been done clearly, and the amount identified. And I agree with the chairman that we need to remember that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and councillors. Moving into our capital expenditure on page 13, at the end of June, our revised program went down to $56 million. And as you can see there, we've spent $51 million by the end of the financial year, which is 91%. So we've met our target in regards to capital expenditure. Overall, that percentage will increase a little bit with some end of year processing of some of our invoices coming through. So that's the lower number. KPIs for the year. So at the end of June, we had 6 out of the 33 that were off track at this point in time, and 1 that was to be monitored that was slightly within that the variance bracket. So overall, 7 out of the 33 were off track or monitoring, which is 21%. It's a little bit higher than what the 10% is that we had in our initial claims, but we pretty well pushed through and tried to achieve as many KPIs as we could. And as such, the schedule of KPIs is included within the papers. Moving into the actual schedules attached to the report. Here you've got the fund and function statement that's on 16 through to 19, pretty well depicting the service areas of where we're up and down within the mix. The 10 million operating revenue, the 1.2 of non-operating revenue, and then our operating expenses over by about 2 million, and our 4.8 under in capital expenditure. So overall, as we go through the service reports or the operational reports, we'll highlight those as we're coming through. Moving with our bank reconciliation and cash availability on page 20, as you can see, there's a massive spike coming through from April right up to the end of June. Obviously, a lot of those funds that will be held in reserve for a lot of the capital expenditure to be undertaken coming into the mix. Our investment schedule on page 21 just shows all our investments coming through. At the end of June, we had 9.6 sitting in our cash management account, which is more or less was available for payment of creditors coming through at the end of June. And as you can see there, we've only got one now that was all that in the very dark ages of the interest rates of 1.4%, which will come off at the end of December 24. So all the rest are high fours and into fives. So we're achieving a good return on our investments at this point in time. With our loans, obviously we've entered into the loans at the low point in a couple of our major loans, which has been beneficial. So we've got a fair chunk of our outstanding debt coming through, sitting at the interest rate of from 2% up to 3.14%. So there's a large chunk of that debt. So that will be fixed until the term of those loans coming out. So as you can see, that we've been diligent in getting that at a good rate.
Mr. Chair, contrary to perhaps prevailing thought, that is good business. If you're going to do infrastructure or borrow money, you borrow at the lowest interest rate you can get. And that should be prevail not only from the council, but it's also in private enterprise. It does the same thing. So council should do the same thing. And I commend us for doing that, because that's just good business.
Thank you, Councillor. Moving into our capital works expenditure summary, just to give you a highlight of the different service areas there. As you can see on page 23, the main underspend at this point in time was transport and communication, being the higher expenditure from an infrastructure point of view, obviously coming through. But the majority of the underspend is in that area, which we will receive a lot of end of year invoices coming into the mix. Over the course of the pages 24 through to 32 is more or less the detailed high level items of infrastructure we've been undertaking and how they are tracking to budget coming into the mix. So that's just pretty well for your information. Moving on to our KPI side of things, we've pretty well highlighted there all our KPIs coming through. Obviously, the red ones are the ones that are actually not achieving at this point in time, from page 33 to 44. The ones that we aren't achieving effectively come through from our Fit for the Future ratio in regards to the 90% of the ratio. At the moment, we're getting about 2/3 of that ratio. The ones that we aren't achieving are pretty well predominantly the own source income and our operating result, which makes it very difficult for councils to meet that operating result, given the depreciation is included in that item. The other items that to highlight, with our cyber security training, we're continuing with that cyber security training. That's another one that's a red one. Inspection program's been lower than budget than we anticipated by year end. Obviously, we've had a lot of staff vacancies within that department, and we're currently getting on top of those inspection regimes. Our sustainability targets haven't quite been met coming through. That's on page 42. We're continuing with our action plan from the sustainability committee that was in place. So we'll continue to go down that path. Capital works undertaken at this point in time, 83% that has improved since these were produced, and with the end of year processing of invoices, and that's now up to 91%, which is quite pleasing, and that should turn green by the end of the year. Our one that we're looking at is 80% of capital works completed. Again, the amber one, that will turn into effectively a green item by the end of the year. Our maintenance completed, the 90% of maintenance completed. We're a little bit behind that. However, we've undertaken a lot of our capital program from some of our own crews to reduce our costs down for those projects and to deliver them more efficiently and cost effective, which has affected our ability to do a fair bit of our maintenance. So we've continued doing the maintenance as and when required, but moving forward, as those capital projects come off, we'll be able to get back onto that regime. So those are the items that effectively are the red items coming through that are off track. As you can see, there is a couple there that will turn back into green, which will be quite pleasing coming in.
Yeah. Thank you, Wayne. It's on KPIs. I'm not sure we've got the mix right here, and we'll have an interesting conversation with a new group of councillors as to what KPIs might perhaps be more appropriate, less appropriate, whatever. I just noticed through here, and I'll take this offline, but there's probably some formatting errors within some of the calculations here. Some of these calculations don't make sense, and I'd like to have a bit of a discussion about some raw data issues as well. Yeah.
Yep.
That'd be good if we could probably take that on notice.
Yeah, we'll take that on notice to have a review of the KPIs with the new councillor, and secondly the data that we are collecting and bringing through as the recommendations. The last part of the report there is the actual the letter from the Office of Local Government in regards to the approval of those internal loans. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Wayne. That's quite the effort. And thank you for your patience with us councillors with our questions. It is a great opportunity in this forum to get to ask these questions as such. But going forward, councillors, we happy if I move this all together, all 6 items?
I'm happy to move, and the other comment that I would like to make, Mr. Chair, is that there was, I think, an email or something came around that my understanding was to sort of shorten what we've just gone through, and while I won't be on council next time round, I do agree that it should not be shortened. The amount of discussion and understanding and clarification that we've just gone through, I think, is very, very important, not only for this committee, but also for other committees too. I think it's very, very important not to skip over and say, well, we've got it all done in 25 minutes. I just think that means we really haven't read our reports. So I completely agree with you.
Just on that, the intent of that email was not to shorten the committee, but actually allow time for questions to be asked. So the councillor has to read the papers, which is not always the case. And then the councillor has to ask questions based on their reading of it instead of the staff, who do a fantastic job, spoon feeding us. So yes, I understand what you're saying. However, that was not the intent.
Okay, I accept that, but anyway, I've made my statement. Thank you.
So I think did we have them? I think Councillor Mackenzie actually jumped in and moved.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, councillor. And seconded Councillor Burns. All those in favour? I think we're all happy. Ayes have it. Thank you, Karen. And if you've had your drink of water there, Mr. Phelps.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We can move forward into the operational report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We'll just move into Corp 07.2 on page 49. It's our operational report. First part of the operational report is in regards to councillor attendance. So that's there for your information. The attendees that did come through for each of the meetings coming through. And the second part of it is running through just our service reports, our quarterly service reports, on a more detailed version. I will just highlight items throughout and obviously just raise your hand as and when required, and we can answer those questions as we see fit. Moving into the asset management on 52. Obviously there won't be any votes or surrenders at all throughout this, so we'll just go through the variations. So our variation on the bottom line at the end of the year was a positive variance of 48,000, of which was mainly due to our admin and general expenses. So our admin was pretty well lower, salaries and a few staff vacancies during the year. Communications on page 53, again a little bit underspent at this point in time, again just under in our salaries area, so nothing else to highlight. Customer service, here we're a little bit overspent, just with our admin costs for our salaries, a little bit higher than what we anticipated during the year, but it's only a minor number overall. Overspending in our depot.
Just on that, Wayne, is that, are we overstaffed? Are we paying staff more than we expected to?
Pretty well, it's only 2% over. So effectively, it could be just a timing of people going on leave, coming through, and using casuals to backfill those roles. So overall, you're talking about $8,500 and $500,000. So it's not too bad.
Just loading something.
Yep. Correct. Depot operations on page 55, a little bit overspent by 23. Here we'll be recognising some radio tower fees coming through in the end of year processing, so that will improve the bottom line down below. We haven't undertaken any upgrades during the year because we've done a fair bit of maintenance work on our facility. So we undertook a fair bit of maintenance that was offset by the capital expenditure we had outstanding there. So really it's an upgrade, but just a maintenance upgrade more than anything. Financial services, here as highlighted earlier, we're up by about $260,000, of which the overheads, admin overheads, has been one primary factor of that, which is 215, and then we're a bit underspent in our salaries in regards to our finance team, with some vacant positions held throughout the year. Fleet management on page 57. Here we're about 1.2 behind, which effectively is the internal fleet recovery, which is 1.2. A little bit down as highlighted in the summary pages in our disposal of our fleet, and in our overall costs coming through. You can see that disposal revenue is offset by the lower capital expenditure that we've undertaken. And in the mix, in the main area there, as you can see, the plant costs are lower by about 300,000, and our fuel costs are up by about 300,000. So they're pretty well offsetting each other coming through the mix.
Chair, the plant costs, etc., down by that figure. How did that occur?
Overall, councillor, it just depends on what is breaking.
Not replacing the existing.
No, we're going through the same maintenance regimes and everything like that. It's predominantly use of external contractors to undertake works on our heavy kit if we've had a major damage throughout the year, of which we haven't had any major concerns. So it's really a timing thing. It's a reactive process that we've pretty well budgeted for a few more breakages than what we anticipated that we actually had throughout the year. So that's why the underspend is.
Mr. Chair, it's not the replacement of replacement of existing or doing away with existing equipment.
No, nothing to do with that at all, councillor.
Mr. Chair, is there any data on the cost of using council equipment compared to the contractors' equipment?
We did that, you did that work, didn't we?
Have you?
And it was, at 1 to 1.2.
Effectively, yes,
Yeah.
yes. So that was effectively our fleet is 1 to 1.2 of contractors. So overall, when you look at that, with the contractors, we mainly use contractors to supplement our own labour, our own labour force. We've struggled to entertain the idea of recruitment of our operators in the field, obviously, which has a major effect in regards to a lot of our works, which we have to just supplement with contractors to undertake those works. So we're always looking for additional operators, and that will probably be utilising our fleet a lot more. Moving into our general management area here, a little bit underspent overall, but it's pretty well in line with budget. Governance risk coming through, it's a little bit underspent at the moment. There's a couple of factors in here. Our insurance costs are up by about 27, but our audit fees are down by 51. We've just got to take up our accrual for end of year audit coming through. So that'll bring that back into alignment. Human resources, a little bit underspent by about 27. Overall, we're a little bit lower in our salaries coming into the mix. So we've just had a bit lower costs there. Into information services, as highlighted earlier, just with a lot of our timing coming through, our salaries is down in regards to a number of our areas there with staff vacancies and extended leave taken, and a lot of timing in regards to the use of consultants and our subscriptions to our software licenses. Overall, our in capital, we're down by about 37,000 to what we anticipated, the 50. We just haven't fully utilised all the availability there. We've had only minimal upgrades of our equipment undertaken during the year. We've just gone through the process of doing a fair bit of upgrading of our internal computer systems coming through the mix, which will be a lease arrangement going forward into the current year, coming into the mix, an operational lease. So that'll just bring a lot of our equipment up to speed. Infrastructure support. On page 62.
Sorry, I'll just ask, just on infrastructure of computing facilities and any networking facilities. There's obvious, I would presume, there's an obvious focus on cyber security within that, as we're seeing organisations as such targeted, and it is a rather high risk issue. So we're retaining enough focus on that issue.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, no, we definitely have got a very steely focus in regards to cyber security. Obviously, the Audit Office of New South Wales also has a very steely look on from an audit perspective, from an external audit perspective, on what councils are doing from a cyber security aspect, and making sure that we have appropriate protections in place for it. A lot of the upgrades at the moment are mainly around productivity and of the actual use of the software that we do have on tap, and hopefully make our job, a lot of staff jobs, a lot easier and quicker to get into programs and to utilise. Infrastructure support on page 62. Here we're a little bit underspent in salaries and only minimal costs in our general costs there. So apart from that, it's just a bit of underspend, which is good. Revenue services is underspent by about 27. We've had a staff vacancy in this area for probably the first 4 months of the year, which has pretty well given us the saving. A bit of unders in our revenue stream, and also our legal debt recovery. So we undertook not very much debt recovery at all during the year. It's one of our focuses moving forward that we'll be undertaking that. Obviously, coming out of COVID and with a lot of things that have been kicking around in regards to droughts and floods, we have to be mindful.
Chair, yeah, just on that debt recovery, is that meaning, what is the figure? In other words, is that meaning that it's increasing, or is it just what? What's causing that?
in regards to, we haven't had to undertake too much debt recovery for the
Good.
current year coming through.
Right.
So our levels of
Compliance.
indebtedness with our community, or pretty well the community's indebtedness to council, has been relatively consistent. So it's been monitored as we've been coming through.
Thank you.
With our stores and purchasing on page 64, here we're a little bit underspent again. A position of the trainee store person was vacant during the year, and that's just recently been filled. We've a little bit over in our sundry and suspense areas there. That's just more or less stock that will be reallocated out into jobs from gravel stockpiles coming through. Sustainability on page 65, pretty well spot on budget, so nothing to highlight there. Admin and education underneath community services and education on page 66. Here we're a little bit extra in revenue streams, which is quite pleasing, but our main underspend is in regards to our admin costs, which is the salaries for staff vacancies coming through. So there's been a bit of a theme in regards to those staff vacancies throughout the year, of which we've been filling a number of roles, so at the back end of the financial year coming through. Government Place, here on page 67, here you can see where we've got that additional revenue streams coming through, but we're over budget by about nearly $500,000 come the end of the year. And as you can see there, it's pretty well in regards to personal care, having available staff to undertake that personal care for our residents, plus also the general expenses, which includes a lot of our consultants coming
Mr.
through.
Chair, I just repeat what I said earlier there, that I just believe the new council needs to really address this. This is because this is continuing. And somehow I just don't know what the sustainability of it going that way. Hopefully it doesn't go up, that's all. I believe it's a big problem for a great facility.
Yes, councillor, we definitely, it's one of those items that we continually are looking at. Through the independent living units on page 68, we're pretty well chugging on budget. We're a little bit underspent at the moment, but mainly due to some capital works that hasn't been undertaken or not required to be undertaken effectively. They're pretty well tenanted out, those facilities, and the actual facilities are in a condition where we haven't had to upgrade any of the building works. Moving into our early learning centre on page 69, here we're a little bit in front of budget, which is pleasing. Overall, the main reason why we're in front is our capital expenditure. With increasing our utilisation of the facility, has taken a fair chunk of the staff's mind. And we're looking at doing some upgrades coming into the current financial year, because we've been successful in securing a little bit of grant funding. So we'll be coupling that with some monies that the Early Learning Centre does have available in the budget in the current year, in the 24-25 year, to undertake a fair bit of pretty well playground development coming through would make it more attractive. Moving into our family daycare area on page 70, here we're a little bit in front of budget at the moment. And the main reason for that is because of the family daycare business marketing project. So we haven't fully spent that budget out by the end of the year. Those funds are grant funded, so they'll be put off into a reserve and brought in for the next couple of years. So it's a 3-year program, that project, and it's pretty well the department looking at a lot of those services trying to become more self-sufficient and not receiving sustainability grants moving forward.
And well done to all staff involved in that for the sustainability of that business area. But all across that there, it's very important that we keep maintaining those services. There is an absolute shortage in this town. There's a lot of working parents that struggle with childcare, and it's a credit to staff to keep it going under the conditions that they have to under the Act under state government. But if we can just continually focus on that area, I think that'll be a great asset for community.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, definitely, they do a great job. Moving out of social protection on page 71, here a little bit underspent. We haven't been successful in getting a lot of grants for the social protection area. And obviously with the reduction in grants, our programs have suffered for it coming through. So overall, a little bit underspent in that area. Hopefully in the current year, we'll be more successful and we can undertake a lot more programs. Youth services on page 72. Here we're a little bit underspent overall. With our grants, we're a little bit up in our grant funding. So for our youth holiday programs coming into the mix, and then across the board, we're a little bit down overall in a lot of the areas coming through. So there's been a few savings coming into the mix.
Mr. Chair, just a question regarding, I've just noted the Merriwell Youth Centre has not been open all the time. Is that a staffing issue or just non-attendance or just what? What's going on there?
Through you,
We do
Mr.
have
Chair.
funds, in other words, to keep it open?
Yeah, through you,
Thought
Mr.
we
Chair.
did.
Yes, no, the facility is included in the budget, and there is funds to keep that open. We can probably take that on notice and come back to you in regards to the opening times and so forth with that facility over there.
Yeah, and the staffing issue too.
Correct. Yeah.
Thank you.
Probably a good opportunity, councillor, to because this is quite a pleasing report here, and it's great to see the NAIDOC week and the participation there and the interaction also with the neighbourhood centre with this organisation. But it is important, especially in our outer reaches in Murrundi, slip of the tongue there. Aberdeen doesn't get one, just saying. At Merriwell, and it might be beneficial to the council if we get some head counts as well as to how effective each of these areas are. I'm sure we take populated numbers on a monthly basis. If we could perhaps have those as well.
Yep. Through you, Mr. Chair, we'll take that on notice and provide that information accordingly.
Thank you.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, just on that slip of a tongue, it is something that we need to consider too, because Aberdeen is our second largest population base in the Upper Hunter Shire, yet it receives absolutely no services from this shire. We have sporting grounds there, and we have that's it. We've got sporting grounds there,
We've got
and a library.
So I have to admit, it as much as I advertise it as a slip of the tongue, it is not, because I have been advocating for some sort of youth service, maybe not in the traditional sense, but we do need to, as Councillor Burns here said, we need to focus more on Aberdeen if we can. And I know finances are tough, but it's a large centre, and the youth and the children of that area need to be engaged adequately. And I think it's a great point you brought up there, Deputy.
Yeah, we'll take those comments on notice. Moving into our camping area and caravan park, here we're a little bit overspent at this point in time. Our revenue streams are up, which is very pleasing. So our facilities and camping grounds are getting utilised quite well. And our overspends has been in our utility cost, which is there's some misallocation of some land rates there, which we need to correct. But our caravan expenses has been up a little bit, but that's been offset by the increased revenue streams. But apart from that, it's quite pleasing that those facilities and those activities are being utilised to their fullest. Page 74, Community Connect, pretty well spot on budget, a little bit up in revenue, but apart from that, nothing else to highlight there. On 75, we've got economic promotion. Here we're in front of budget by about 140K, of which there's two items in here that make that up, which is our grants that we received for our open streets promotions. So we'll be undertaking those during the course of this financial year. and our branding project. So it's a little bit underspent by the end of June this year. However, that project is continuing to chug along quite well, and will be fully completed by about September, I think, in the current financial year coming through. Ready for a new council when that election goes through in September. Private works on page 76 here, a little bit over budget at this point in time. Our revenue coming in has been a little bit lower than we anticipated, and our costs have been a little bit lower as well, obviously with lower requests coming through. So overall, it's just been chugging along. Real estate, page 77. Here we're overspent by about $100,000 at this point in time. The main items for that has been a little bit extra cost in salaries, which will have to be reallocated off to some of the other business areas there. That's just with the administration of the property portfolio. Our utility costs, obviously with the insurances and everything going through the roof, they're a lot higher. And building maintenance, we've undertaken a fair bit of building maintenance coming through for some of our facilities that were looking a bit tired. Plus also the other item in here, which is about 36,000, has been the use of consultants in regards to our land development opportunities. Obviously, council does have a lot of excess land, which it's trying to utilise and either dispose of or develop over the course of time, so that we can generate a good return back on that for the community. Overall, we had a little bit more development in Campbell's Corner, mainly with trying to renew a lot of the shops that have been fully leased out now. So undertaking a bit of return on that. Apart from that, that's about where it all sits. Sale yards on page 78. Here we're a little bit over budget by the 145K, which predominantly is the sludge pond coming through. Sludge pond.
Is that why I saw all those agents hanging around that bucket as you come out?
No, Mr. Chair, as with your Aberdeen slip of the tongue, mine was the sludge fund, yes. Overall, with the sale yards, it's mainly the sludge ponds, EPA requirement to do that. So it's as I said, a 1 in 15 to 20 year maintenance program that we had to undertake during the current financial year. Scone Golf Course, pretty well on track with regards to that on page 79. So nothing to highlight there. Our tourism and area promotion on page 80. Here we're a little bit overspent by the 270,000. As mentioned earlier, the revenue streams from the Warbirds over Scone and our aerodrome events and promotions is down at the end of the year. With regards to our costs, we've pretty well kept our costs pretty well in check, which has been quite good. So we've kept them under tap. We've had an underspend obviously in the aerodrome events and promotions because we haven't done any. So that's 100,000. But the offsetter against that is the Reconnect Regional New South Wales Community, where we've spent about $40,000. That was fully grant funded, so we were bringing back into play a grant funding item for that. Apart from that, those are the main items coming through. Moving into our noxious plants and vermin control on page 81, pretty well spot on budget. 82, we've got our stormwater management. Pretty well the underspend in here is our drainage maintenance program. It's a little bit underspent to date. Street cleaning on 83, a little bit overspent on our contractor there than we anticipated. So obviously with the cost of doing business is going up, so a little bit extra in costs for that operation. Page 84, here with waste management, again over budget in regards to the overall cost, but that's on a revised budget. So 160,000 over at the moment, a little bit lower in our landfill revenue. Obviously, I mentioned earlier, we didn't get the amount of revenue coming in for the last couple of months as we anticipated. But overall, we're up by about nearly $1.3 million in that revenue stream for the disposal into our landfills. On page 86, we've got the rates, grants and interest. Here, nearly $2 million above budget. And predominantly that's all the financial assistance grants in advance that we received above what we anticipated to get. Council services on page 87, underspent in this area by about 60K. Lower section 356 contributions provided during the year. So we've had lower requests coming through, or eligible requests coming through, I beg your pardon. And our mayor and electoral members' expenses is down a little bit. Obviously we've had a vacancy in a councillor's area there. So it's a little bit lower coming through. Moving into health services on page 88, here we're a little bit in front of budget overall. Just lower health inspections on site sewer management costs coming through the mix. Our customer service on the other side of that is up. Money allocations in regards to that area there, you'll see coming through in the building services and the public order areas. A lot of those customer service items are down. So when you offset them all, they pretty well come back to line ball. But the main one here is the health inspections, and pretty well that's the reason why our KPI was showing a red indicator earlier, just with the staffing availability coming in.
I think we've had some operational challenges in that space, so it's not really a realistic KPI for the time period, is it?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, you're correct in that assertion. Page 89, emergency housing, pretty well spot on budget, so nothing to highlight there. And the same for low income housing on page 90, pretty well spot on budget. Public cemeteries on page 91, a little bit overspent by about 40,000 to the end of year budget. And predominantly that is driven by the lower revenue streams coming through. So we only received down by about 38,000 in revenue for our site and interment fees. Again, as I said, that's really dependent on the climate throughout the year coming through, whether or not that is up and down. The public conveniences on page 92, as I mentioned earlier, this is overspent by about $87,000. We'll be looking at that and seeing whether or not we can reduce those costs down to a more realistic area going forward into the current financial year. On page 93, street lighting, in front of budget by about $56,000. Lower electricity costs, which has been pleasing than what we budgeted for. So that's been pleasing, and underspend at the moment in regards to the pedestrian crossing at Venica Street, which is an ongoing project and it will continue into the current financial year.
I was going to ask, because I've been over at Merriwa a few times lately, but only in the daytime, and I do notice there's LED lights up on poles there. They are not working as of yet.
My understanding from RAG that it was not not council, but the I think it was Ausgrid, or those who have to have their qualified staff attach them, that they've stopped for some reason, or they can't. I don't know what it is, but anyway, it stopped, and I agree. I saw that the poles changed. Why aren't they connected?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we can take that on notice and obtain the reason why. Obviously, we're reliant on Ausgrid to connect the power to it and energize the lights so they work. So I think we've probably done a lot of the work that we can do, and now we're relying on different authorities to do the rest. Moving into page 94. Town planning, here you can see we're well in front of budget, predominantly driven by the contributions coming through. Overall, our grant revenue is up as well, and it's offset by the money spent in regards to a lot of our reviews, our land use review and our floodplain management reviews. and our planning portal, which will have some grant funding to come back against that 29,000. So apart from that, the only other item there is our review of our Section 94 contributions, which we haven't undertaken. We've been mainly focusing on our land use strategy plus our flood management coming through, but it hasn't fallen off the radar and it will continue into the current year coming in. 95, building control. Here we're in front of budget again by about 120,000, underspent in our customer service area, and that's a bit of the offset of that other 50,000. And our building services area with staff vacancies and extended leave that has been undertaken by the folks in that development area. Quarry operations on page 96. Here over budget by about 500. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of that is our blasting and crushing costs coming through, and we'll be taking that up as a stockpile available for current and future projects that will be undertaken up at on the up Elliston Way as well as out Kewen out West Way. Page 97, animal control. Here a little bit underspent overall, but pretty well in line with budget. Emergency services on page 98. Again, a little bit overspent here, but pretty well in line with budget overall. And the same with our fire services area as well on page 99. LG regulation and enforcement. Again, we're a little bit underspent here, just with our pool inspections and a bit of our nuisance and health inspections coming through as well. So we're a little bit underspent in the cost of delivering those. Plus also our customer service again is down in this area, which has offset that other customer service overs. Moving into our rec and culture areas, our community centres and halls on page 101. Underspent at the moment by about 22,000, predominantly driven by the community halls revitalisation program. We didn't undertake any works in regards to that revitalisation things, but however, we've identified a number of sites for the 24-25 year. So we'll be undertaking some work to bring those facilities up to speed and give them a new fresh look into the new year. On page 102, cultural services. Here we've pretty well in line with our budget coming through. As you can see, we're a little bit underspent in our community programs and events and Kiora. However, Kiora didn't achieve the revenue streams of what we thought it would from fee entries and so forth and contributions. So it effectively is an offsetter with the lower revenue streams up top there. But overall, it'll be moving forward into the new year. Museums on page 103. Here we're underspent by about 27, which predominantly is the upgrade works of the shed that's down at the Historical Society. So we'll be undertaking that work in the current year. Other sport and rec on page 104. Here we're well and truly underspent coming through. Overall, we received the grant funding coming in for the Scone mountain bike track, which is underspent at this point in time. So we've got a saving there. And also the administration cost with the role of the coordinator in that area being moved around a little bit. So a little bit underspent in that area. 105 Parks and Gardens. Overall, we're overspent by about $30,000. A little bit extra in our admin costs, just with the wages coming through. This is pretty well, you can couple this with the sporting grounds area as well, with our staff training, because we're underspending our staff training in sporting grounds, and they're more or less the same folks in both areas. Tree maintenance has been higher, but our actual servicing of our grounds has been lower, so that's a bit of an offsetter. But overall, we're a little bit overspent by the end of the year. Our public libraries, here on 106, we're pretty well in line with budget, except we're a little bit underspent in our capital expenditure on the Scone Library development. And that's why we've got the underspend of 28 on the bottom line, with 25 of
Chair,
that.
have we got anything on actual numbers of using our facility? Because they're good. Mary was, I believe, is exceptional. But is there any numbers that are actually using it and using Scone? And I think there's one at the other centres too, isn't there? Aberdeen, is there one at Aberdeen? There is, yeah.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, we do maintain numbers for those facilities,
Okay.
and we can obtain those and
Yeah,
provide
look,
those accordingly.
Yes, it's not
Yeah.
not something that has to have, but I'd be very interested anyway to see what they are. Okay, thank you.
Moving into sporting grounds and venues, here, as mentioned earlier, we're overspent by about 288,000. We've undertaken a fair bit of fall over work in regards to our upgrade of a lot of our facilities. Jefferson Park Master Plan, we've completed that master plan going forward. It's effectively, we'll have grant funding attached to it, so it'll come out of the mix. But the main items here has been our utilities and our sporting grounds servicing costs have been the overspend. So those are the items which we'll undertake and have a look at going forward.
Just on master plans and the like, I believe we've got an RA there with Destin to have a look at indoor sports and a master plan. And do we have some sort of plan going forward as to how we're going to approach that?
Through you, Mr. Chair,
Sorry.
we had some internal talks in regards to the process moving forward and looking at the different sites. There've been a number of sites bandied around about where best to do that plan on, or do the master plan on. And that effectively has been undertaken at this point in time. So we can provide an update in regards to that item. Moving into our swimming pools area on page 108, here, overspent by about the 190K. Obviously, that's relating to the capital grants funding that we'll have a year-end processing. White Park Complex on page 109. Overall, as you can see there, it's 1.25 million in the red coming through. Majority of that is our capital grants to be recognised by the end of the year, which is about 700,000 of it. Also, the White Park electrical upgrade is in advance of where we thought it would be by the end of the year. So that's another $250,000 there. And effectively the balance of it is coming back to a White Park development, which is extension of the power work supply that's going down to the camping sites, which will be beneficial, and that'll be grant funded as well. So that'll come through as grant funding. But our user fees are down, as you can see there, by about 173,000.
Yeah. Now I'm cautious on spending any more capital money while we're overspending capital money, but I was just wondering an update on the roof for the cattle yards, and has that tender gone out yet?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, I believe that tender's gone out. So I can provide an update, take that on notice and provide an update to where that actually sits. Moving into aerodromes on 110, here we're a little bit over budget again, and predominantly it's relating to the capital expenditure side of things and our capital grants. So we're lower by about 150,000 in capital grants received, there'll be a recognition of a capital grant into the mix, and we're underspent in the actual delivery of the work shed due to delays with the taking down of the NDB towers out of the facility. So we're undertaking the works on that at this point in time. So we're going through the process of getting that finalised, hopefully within this first quarter of the new financial year. But apart from that, we've had a little bit more in operational costs, but lower in maintenance costs coming through. So they're pretty well offset each other in the operational area. Moving into our bridges area on 111, here you can see where we've got the capital grants is down by about 2.6 and our capital expenditures down by 2.4. So they pretty well offset each other, those major capital works coming through the mix. The biggest item in this area here where we have the underspend overall is the 266 lower maintenance that's been required on our network, which is quite pleasing. But apart from the Morella Street Causeway, all the other bridge projects have now been completed. Footpaths and cycleways on page 113. Here we're a little bit underspent at this point in time. Our capital grants, we need to recognise our last capital grants in regards to the Merriwall Footpath cycleway. But our expenditure on our capital works has been lower than what we anticipated coming through. So it's about 140,000. So, and the other item in there in operational, our maintenance has also been lower. So adding all those together, we're underspent by about $66,000.
Chair, just on the footpath, the one at Merrywoods, we've gone past it, but the guardrail around the Venica Street and I always get the one McCarter Street, McCartney, I think it is, street, around the Catholic Presbytery area there. Was there any funds available to do that? Or I spoke to Rag about it, but I'm not sure whether he was able to gain something. I think it is required, but because it's exposed so much and it's narrow, exposed so much to the actual turn, the roadway. I think he was going to talk to the safety people or something about it. Do you know anything further about that?
We would probably be talking to the road safety people at Transport.
Yes.
So we'll probably be going through those processes.
Right.
We are actually looking at that at this point in time. So we'll probably be able to advise further down the track.
Mr. Chair, in effect, the boundary did not have to be changed if they put those guardrails in. The boundary with the church would not have to be changed, from my understanding.
Right.
Okay.
I'd have to take that on notice if
Okay,
that was
that's fine. Thank you.
Councillor. Moving into the state roads area on 114, here $1.5 million behind, but as we mentioned earlier, the end of year data be taken up will increase that significantly, and our overspend in regards to our general contract works is will be covered off by that data coming through. Overall, as you can see, with the non-operating expenditure there, about that just under 300,000 is effectively the works that council is allowed to put into a reserve coming through the mix. So that's the item that is the surplus from the operations. Moving into our regional bridge and road network on 115. Here we're overspent by about 540,000, of which is made up by that capital grants with $2 million in regards to the main road 358, just lower than what we anticipated before the end of the year. Bit of an overspend in regards to the maintenance of our regional roads, with a bit more cost going towards flood related damages, which will be recouped coming through. And the offsetter against those two items, which have been overspent or negative to budget, the positive to budget, which is we haven't spent any money in regards to Main Road 62 repair along Murdering Hut Gully there, which will be undertaking those works in the 24-25 year, and Coulson's Creek Road of $1.2 million lower, of which we've received an invoice for that for the end of June, which will be recognised in the end of year processing. Roads local, the sealed and unsealed and urban areas. Here on page 116 to 117, we're a little bit overspent to date by about $1 million, primarily due to capital grants to be received at year-end processing coming through the mix. So about $2.3 million underspent there, or behind budget there. The offsetter against that has been our financial assistance grants received in advance, which has been pleasing. So that coming through, which has been offset slightly by the flood damage claims. So up to the end of June, we're about $500,000 from where we anticipated to be for our flood damage claims. But it's really a timing thing more than anything else. It's only just having available resources to undertake the works. Overall, as you come down into our operating expenditure, as you can see there, the overspends we've got in admin and staff training, which we highlighted in the summary areas, and our maintenance of our rural sealed, unsealed, and urban sealed areas there. A little bit underspent there. And as I mentioned, with the flood damage grant funding, we're a little bit underspent at the moment in our flood restoration works by about $400,000. So you can take that into account when you're looking at that, the financial assistance grants increase. In regards to our capital expenditure, overall, we're pretty well nearly hitting or a little bit overspending our budget overall. Major items included in here has been our Moonam Brook Road, which is underspent at the moment of about 320. Barrington Forest, which is the offsetter against that when you look at stages 1 and 2, which is the 330 going the other way. So they pretty well complement each other. The underspend has been our culvert subsidence, which is down a bit, and our Kalingal Road rehabilitation works, which has been grant funded, which we've done the 285,000 there. Apart from that, everything else has been pretty well chugging along on tap. So it's been quite pleasing to deliver the amount of work that has been there. Moving into our transport auxiliaries area on page 118. Overall, here you can see we're overspent by about 330,000, predominantly driven of $3.3 million. Beg your pardon. Predominantly driven by the capital grants to be recognised by year end. So once we receive that, recognise those, that'll bring that back into alignment coming through. Moving into our water supplies on page 119 to 120. Overall, bottom line is we're overspent by about $180,000 in total. Pretty well, we've been in line all the way down through the mix. Our operating expenses have been up by about $500,000, but as I said earlier, we'll probably be bringing some of that back into the capital area, which is underspent at the moment by about $260,000. But apart from that, it's been pretty well chugging along on track. Moving into our sewerage network on page 121 through to 122. Again, overall, we've overspent by about $1 million. And again, it's mainly driven by the sewer mains, which we'll be looking at to see whether or not we will capitalise some of those works out of those sewer mains area. Engineering supervision, we've had some project management costs going into there, which we'll allocate out to our capital works program. And our sewer treatment is up a fair bit from just in our treatment activities been higher than we anticipated during the year. They've been offset slightly by the capital works area. So it's a little bit underspent at this point in time, but by the time we reallocate some costs, that'll be covered off, and probably we would have spent a little bit more than what we anticipated in the budget coming into the mix, which is always a good thing because we're actually covering off our network. We're actually renewing our network quicker than we anticipated in the 24-25 year, a 23-24 year, beg your pardon. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Wayne. I believe we have a mover and a seconder for noting all your comments.
Who's seconded?
Greg. All those in favour. Councillor Mackenzie. That'll be an aye.
Yep.
Just give me a break, Wayne, really. But I think the ayes have it. Thanks, Karen. And we will just move on to our next area, which is the contractors and expenses report. Briefly run us through this.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Corp 07.3. Here we've just got our contractors and expenses report, just in regards to consultancy and legal fees coming into the mix, which is our report on page 125. Here just more or less indicates where we are spending a lot of our legal costs, broken up into the main categories there, and also our detailed consultants costs, which effectively relate to EPA and heritage.
Mr. Chair, if I just may ask, on page 125, legal costs, is there any, we call it the helipad, helicopter pad. When the council opposed that, it was taken to court. Do we have any costing on what that actually cost the council?
Yes, councillor, we can get that costing for you. It's pretty well covered off in the planning matters. Overall, we can get you the exact number that the council did.
It was
I would appreciate
$50,000.
How much?
It was $50,000.
Well, that was bandied around, but was it the actual figure? It was it?
That was the figure given to us by the director of planning.
So,
Yeah, you might get back to councillor Campbell on a 2-cent figure.
We will,
to
we will
keep
take that
him
on notice and come
satisfied.
back with the number.
It is nice to make sure that we do have the correct figures to bandy around. So that's yeah, thank you, Wayne.
appreciate that. Thank you.
I would think overall, I'll just make a comment on that. We haven't, given that we've had one particular item which has been rather expensive. I think we on the whole haven't spent much money in this area. I'm quite surprised. So well done to all those. Now, if we've got a mover in Councillor Burns and a seconder, Councillor Campbell. All those in favour to note the 2 items. I think the ayes have it. Thanks, Karen. And we'll move on to the property update, which is Greg's baby. Greg's not here today, but
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We can quickly run through that. So Corp 07.4, pretty well, as indicated there, all our properties, both commercial and residential, are tenanted at this point in time, which is quite pleasing. The progress on a number of the strategies going forward is pretty fluid, as we see coming through there. There's been a number of briefings that have been given in the June 24 month. But apart from that, I just take that as pretty well being read. And we are continuing to entertain and progress a number of those items in there accordingly.
I just did have a before we progress with this. Wonder if we could have, however you want to distribute it, a figure for how much we've got 36 properties rented here. Could we have a figure on that, what that rental income is worth?
Yep.
Yeah.
I think it's contained within the service reports,
Okay.
Chairman. So if we look at, I'll just go just to the page number. Page number 77. So in here, we have the Campbell's Corner revenue, which is 220,000. Our commercial properties revenue, which is 204,000, and our residential, which is about 26,000. Also, we have some vacant land, which we get about $50,000 towards. So adding them all up, it's nearly about $500,000.
Pop them all in there, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's well noted that it's, you know, that's a substantial figure for the bottom line.
Hmm.
Thank you, Wayne, and can I have a mover, please? To note, yeah.
I'll move that the committee note the report and actions undertaken on the date of the property strategy. That would be point 1, and point 2, which I will send through to you, Karen, that the committee equivalent of this one, whatever it is named in the next term, receive a report on the lease strategy moving forward for Campbell's Corner. Now that Kelly Street has been released back into the retail market, I think it might be time to look at putting rents back to a normal market value instead of still sitting at COVID prices.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it?
Hmm.
Thank you for bringing that to the table. Have we got a seconder
I'll send that.
for the amended motion? Seconded, councillor McKenzie. All those in favour of the 2 amended motions? I think the ayes have it. Thanks, Karen, and we'll note that. Finally, here we move on to requests for donations. See, there's 2 requests for donations.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Obviously, we
Yes,
can
I
read
will.
those accordingly. Both, there was 2 received and 2 successful.
I do note we've already spent one. So our voting is rather redundant here, which is possibly problematic, but for the time being, it's
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. I looked at this. It's in line with the policy. It's not problematic. It's just a note. Yeah.
yeah.
So
I hear what you're saying, but
we gave delegation.
we did give delegation, and that's possibly something we need to look at, because that's something that can get out of control in the future. So perhaps we, we'll look at a new council to have a look at that 356 and whether it's appropriate that that's delegated out before we actually give it approval for funding. All those in favour? Oh, did I hit a mover? Sorry.
Yeah, right.
Councillor Campbell moved it and Councillor McKenzie seconded it. Karen, all those in favour? I think the ayes have it. And there not being any further questions or comments for today's proceedings. Everybody happy? I'll call the meeting closed at 10:56. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, councillors. Thank you, Wayne.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Belinda.
Belinda.